Labadiena, aš esu Vaidas Virbukas, Bluebridge MSP tinklų ir saugumo sprendimų skyriaus vadovas. Sveikinu visus susirinkusius į trečiąjį seminarą Bluebridge ir partnerių organizuojamam renginyje 3 saugumo žingsniai. Šiame nemokamų virtualių seminarų cikle stengsimės apžvelgti veiksmus darančius įtaką kibernetiniam saugumui. Ir tikiu, kad mūsų specialistų sukurtas paprastas 3 saugumų žingsnių modelis gali padėti bet kokio dydžio organizacijai užtikrinti savo IT saugumą ir pažangą. O mano tikslas, jeigu kiekvienas iš jūsų iš šio renginio išsinešti bent vieną idėją, ką galėtumėte padaryti, kad dar geriau apsaugotumėte savo duomenis, bus pasiektas. O šios dienos tema kalba apie tai, kaip būtų galima apsaugoti šiuolaikinį duomenų centrą. Ja apžvelgs Helena Goodfellow, saugumo sprendimų pardavimų specialistė iš vieno žinomiausių ir populiariausių pasaulyje virtualizacijos platformų gamintojo VMware, kuris šiuo metu jau siūlo gana platų paslaugų spektrą, pradedant nuo darbo vietų ir baigiant tinklų duomenų centrų saugumo sprendimais. Bus įdomu sužinoti, kokius saugumo funkcionalumus siūlo VMware iš software defined produktų pusės. Helena ves pristatymą. Klausimus jūs galite užduoti viso pristatymo metu. Matote langą chat, rašykite į jį, aš pertrauksiu pranešėją arba turėsime dar laiko pranešimo pabaigoje padiskutuoti. Taigi, malonaus klausimo. Helena, hi.
Hi, good morning. I'll kick off then. Thank you very much for the introduction. My name is Helena Goodfellow. Thank you so much for joining the session this morning on how to improve your data center security for the modern data center. So just a bit about myself. I'm part of the Worldwide Centre of Excellence for Network Security at VMware. I look after the Northern European territory for network security and for our advanced network security solutions within that suite. So on today's session, I'll be discussing and starting with what are we up against and what's the implications of the threat landscapes. Next, we'll cover off how are we protecting ourselves today from these evolving threats, and how can we look to protect ourselves moving forward? And lastly, why VMware for securing the modern data center? As I mentioned, my name is Helena. I've been in network security for just over 10 years now, working at a variety of different network security vendors, such as Fortinet. I actually chose to join VMware after understanding the unique network security play that they have within the market and the fact that they can provide 100% visibility across the modern data center. Obviously, VMware are known as a virtualization partner and a virtualization solution, but due to this unique position they have at being at the heart of, digital transformation in our customers, I saw that VMware was able to design a very specific, unique security solution that sits on the hypervisor and does very much give an answer to the huge challenges that our customers have today of how can they protect the largest attack surface, that east to west traffic within a data center. So let's get started. Let's have a look at the threat landscape. So this landscape, as we know, is ever evolving, and it's always looking to leverage any vulnerability for maximum gains for the attacker. Now, every 11 seconds, a new organization falls victim to a cyber attack, which is a very powerful statistic. And, it shows there really is no hiding. And it is a case of when an attack may happen rather than if an attack will happen. Now, when an attack does happen, the real damage doesn't happen immediately. When an attacker lands on, say, a compromised server, it happens when they start to move laterally within the data center. Now, ransomware is a great example of how a dwell time is increasing. that means an attacker is being able to enter into, say, a data center, and they're able to live off the land. 59% of cyber attacks are something called dual extortion. And this is where a hacker gets data, they encrypt it, and then they offer to sell it back or publish it, causing, as you can imagine, real brand and reputational damage to a company that's been subject to this, subject to fines with GDPR, for example, the organisation failing security compliances, and ultimately having that threaten the risk of losing business critical data and information. Now, on top of the damage from an increase in dual extortion, the average ransomware payment actually rose from 2019 to 2022 by 33%, which is very, very alarming. Now, when we look across the impact across, different industries, it does become very clear that there's a huge risk within every industry. For example, WannaCry ransomware in the UK cost the NHS, the National Health Service here, 100 million, and 93% of healthcare organisations experienced a breach within the past 3 years. Now, many factors affect the cost of a breach, with an increase in dwell time being at the centre of the scale of the damage. It's reported that within financial services, it can take an average of 233 days to detect and contain a breach. So not only does an attacker gain entry, but in this example, they have 233 days to move laterally and move undetected across and within a data center. Again, accessing that critical data and exfiltrating that critical data. So what does all this show us, apart from being very alarming? It shows us that the traditional approach to protecting our key assets are no longer as effective as they once were. We need to adapt as the attackers are constantly evolving. They're constantly seeking to leverage new opportunities to exfiltrate information. And we need to stay one step ahead. As you can see in the bottom right of the screen, the attack and the cost from cyber attacks has only increased nearly threefold or fourfold in the last 3 years, which begs the question, can we afford not to act here? So what and where is the biggest attack surface? It's the data center. As a market leader in virtualization, us at VMware very much know, the key benefits of data center virtualization for our customer enables you, to be able to operate efficiently, but it also needs to be able to operate securely. And the modern data center, the east to west traffic, and I refer to that traffic within the data center, the server to server traffic, is the new battleground. 70 to 80% of traffic is east to west. Very often, this traffic is not visible to our customers, and that allows a huge attack surface, and it allows malicious attacks to happen and to go undetected. And that's where that real damage starts to happen. They're able to move laterally undetected. If you think about this as a real world example for us, in our personal lives, it's as though a thief has broken into our home through our front door. And now that they're in our home, we've allowed them just to be able to move freely between rooms and take what they wish. As you can imagine, this is a huge attack surface, and east to west is that new battleground. Now, securing this traffic today is extremely challenging, as I'm sure a lot of you are aware. The traditional approach here is something called hairpinning, and this is where firewalls are often used by this method, hairpinning, to hairpin the traffic. This is using fundamentally quite large, very often expensive data center firewalls, which are very large, fundamentally perimeter designed firewalls. They require, large traffic bandwidth, which only increases the costs and make it more expensive. But the crucial part here, take away the cost, take away the network changes that need to happen and take away that additional management is the fact that they don't provide 100% visibility within to the data center. Therefore, security becomes a compromise. Also, this hairpin approach prevents scale. It limits the capacity, and it again means that we're compromising on traffic that we're looking at, and we're compromising on security due to the limited capacity of the firewall. There are other factors here: inconsistent and unmanageable policies. Very often organisations will end up with thousands or tens of thousands of stale policies to manage. This becomes a very labour-intensive task, and it means very often that the stale rules aren't removed. Rather than delete them, they're kept. And the reason they're kept is because we're unsure what the knock-on effect would be if we were to delete those policies. Aside from the cost, aside from the technical kind of shortfalls of that solution, let's have a look at the sustainability approach. VMware, own 80% of the virtualization market. We appreciate why organizations are moving to a virtualized data center. Many of the costs associated to this are the land costs, reducing that hardware, not only the delays everyone's seeing on hardware deliveries, but also reducing the cost and our sustainability footprint. More and more organizations are trying to go green as much as they can and taking their corporate social responsibility very seriously. By having this virtualized approach, we're able to save organization costs such as maintenance, hardware costs, and all the way down to power and cooling. So VMware, how can we help? How can we help secure the modern data center? So we fix these traditional trade-offs. We allow, distributed inbuilt security. So each workload gets its own firewall, gets its own IDS, IPS to look for known threats, and its own NDR, the network detection and response solution, enabling you to be able to detect abnormal behavior and therefore protect yourselves against unknown threats. Our solution is scalable, so we don't require network changes, and we're doing that while providing 100% visibility and full coverage. Once the distributed firewall and the enhanced features enabled, it enables you to have simple policies that are easy to manage from one place. And that's because our solution sits within the hypervisor. We have access to all of the rich content and metadata for each workload. And this ultimately allows us to create policies based on this context and have to rely on, old methods such as using IP addresses for policies. What's crucial here as well is policies follow the workload, which means they can be removed when the workload is, preventing that problem we discussed of having thousands or tens of thousands of stale policies. So we've taken, as I've mentioned, the same architectural philosophy to east to west firewall in the data center. Now, we pioneered microsegmentation around 7 years ago, but we didn't just stop there. Over the years, we've evolved into a complete internal firewall stack, as you can see, which we call the service-defined firewall. And its purpose, its objective, is it's purpose-built to detect and block lateral movements of threats in the east to west, so across that virtualized data center, but also bare metal, cloud, and containerized infrastructure. So unlike other more kind of simple basic microsegmentation products, the service-defined firewall is a complete stateful layer 7 firewall with user ID, app ID capabilities, URL filtering, etc. Now, last year we announced the extension and expansion of this network security features and able to apply known threat searching with IDS, IPS, our signature-based detection, which is in exactly the same manner, our distributed architecture, bringing that to every workload, but also our advanced threat prevention. And that includes distributed sandboxing and network traffic analysis. With this, we have a very robust management and analytics framework, which I'll discuss in a little bit more detail on one of the later slides. And ultimately, this is all backed by our threat intelligence unit called TAO, as you can see here, overarching the solution. This brings together threat research from our teams at Carbon Black, our endpoint detection response solution, and the Last Line acquisition. The Last Line acquisition enabled us to be able to integrate the best parts of the network detection response solution that we have. And this allows us to bring everything together and provide an advanced threat prevention solution. So I appreciate I've discussed many aspects of the solution. So let's just take a step back and look at this from a much high level overview. So you need to protect workloads via network security. East to west traffic security, as we've discussed, is the new battleground. This is the largest attack surface that we have. For this, security capabilities need to be fully distributed so you can segment the network and inspect your traffic for threats. Now, NSX intelligence looks at the flow information in real time and it tells you who is talking to who. So that overarches everything that we have here. So step one, we know is not enough to protect the organizations by itself. That is enabling you to be able to have a micro-segmentation, to be able to segment parts of your network, to prevent ultimately east to west and lateral movement. Now, we know this isn't enough to protect our organizations today from advanced threats. Advanced threats are, designed to evade these traditional security solutions such as firewalls. So we now rely on new intelligence to determine if something is a threat. And let's just kind of discuss some of the examples of how we determine this. We have behavioral-based detection, and this is determining what's normal and therefore being able to detect what is abnormal. We have machine learning, and that provides accurate, security-relevant intelligence. That is determining what normal looks like for us and being able to keep one step ahead and sharing the most relevant intelligence. And all of this is joined together with automation. Correlating and understanding all of these separate bits of information is the key to be able to determine a full event or a campaign rather than lots of different events across the network. So how do we do this? We layer in step two, and that is to determine friend from foe. We use behavioral-based IDS, IPS detection, so signature-based detection to look for known bad. And then step three is allowing us to use our network traffic analysis, or abbreviated to NTA, and that determines what normal behavior looks like, and therefore enabling us to determine what actually does abnormal behavior look like. By detecting this quicker, we're reducing the dwell time. As we've discussed at the start of the presentation, how can we reduce the damage from attacks? By reducing that dwell time. Financial organisations have 233 days of an average of dwell time. If we can reduce that dwell time, even if by half, by more than half, down to hours rather than days, it means that attacker cannot walk through our homes and, walk from room to room and take whatever they wish. Now let's delve a little bit deeper into our advanced threat prevention solution. So this solution gives visibility beyond firewalls, and it does this by collecting data from all the sensors in the hypervisor and allows us to determine abnormal behaviour. Often these kinds of solutions can be very sensitive and actually quite tricky to implement and manage. For example, detecting every single event rather than security relevant events put a strain on our security teams, and it means we're not spending time on security critical alerts. For example, part of an exploit, malware, or something suspicious, and not necessarily all threats. Correlating this all together and correlating these individual points together can detect a full attack chain. And this is why our solution aligns to something called the MITRE attack framework. Now, this is a knowledge base of tactics and techniques based on real-world observation of cybersecurity threats. So let's have a look at the solution as a whole. How are we able to, detect full campaigns rather than individual events? What makes our solution so different and so effective? First of all, we have our network sandbox. This sandboxing uses a combination of static and dynamic analysis. And this is where we're looking at the malicious content from the outside, thinking that looks suspicious. What we also do is we allow this, potential malware to actually carry out its instruction, but within a sandbox, within that containerized environment. In that containerized environment. And that allows us to be able to detect against zero-day threats. And we're able to identify malware and malicious documents moving through the network. So next, our network traffic analysis. We're able to identify unwanted network behaviours within two ways. The first way is our unsupervised machine learning that enables us to detect patterns of abnormal behaviours, files, user data. And I know we've touched upon this quite a few times so far in the presentation. So, for example, we're able to take 2 weeks, 3 weeks to determine that intelligence, to determine what does normal behaviour look like. And over that period of time, we're ensuring our solution is becoming more and more intelligent to how you use your network, how the data center runs, how specific users log on at specific times because, for example, they're based in Australia, how maybe once or twice a month certain data is run or certain data is asked to move out of the data center. Rather than alerting you that that's happened, we can sit and say, actually, we're intelligent enough to know this is regular behavior. And this is a pattern of normal behaviour. Now, what makes us different, what's our differentiator here, is something called supervised machine learning. And this is where we decide what is security relevant and we detect that correlation. So a specific alert may be, X has happened, but actually X is something that's normal, or X isn't actually anything to do with a specific security alert. And rather than our security operations center or network security team spending time away from strategic projects or their day-to-day work, they're able to have the intelligence is alerted to them, and they're able to say, I agree, that isn't a security relevant alert, and they can carry on with their day. Now, I'm sure you can imagine this is a lot of data, it's a lot of information, it's a lot of data points. This is the difference. We're able to, by using these three aspects that we've discussed on the screen, the network traffic analysis to determine normal behaviour, therefore determine abnormal behaviour a lot quicker, by using our network sandbox, by being able to identify something's malicious, but sending it to that sandbox, and allowing that malicious or potentially malicious content to carry out its instruction in that containerized environment, and been looking for that known threats, those signature-based threats. Signature-based threats, remember, are going to be based on the security relevance. So a SQL, workload would only look for SQL-based known signature threats rather than looking at every signature within the database. These three together allow us to form correlations. It allows us to automate and provide intelligence to our organisations, and it allows us to detect full campaigns, not individual alerts. So ultimately, we're able to provide that network segmentation, step one, with our distributed firewall, and allow our organisations to segment areas across the data centre, ultimately preventing that lateral movement. Threat prevention, so preventing the lateral movement of threats and detecting signature-based known threats. And lastly, behavioural-based threats. So I appreciate we've discussed the solution in quite a lot of detail and various aspects of the solution. So, the solution allows, as we can see here, first of all, network segmentation. It allows that without any network changes and also allows it in software. There are no delayed delivery times. There's no expensive sustainability or corporate sustainability risks here. And we provide full 100% visibility because we're on the hypervisor. That's step one. Where else can we help? Secure virtual desktop infrastructures. We prevent lateral movement of an attacker, and we do this by blocking and stopping malware moving laterally through the front door of EDI session. Next, compliance. We enable organisation to achieve compliance such as HIPAA, NIST, or National Critical Infrastructure, and we're able to eliminate blind spots. And lastly, appliance consolidation. Now, for the modern data center, we allow you to consolidate and reduce to one solution rather than large, expensive data center firewalls for hairpinning. That's step one. Standalone and separate signature-based detection solutions to detect against known threats with our IDS IPS solution, and also behavioural-based network detection response solution to look for that unknown bad. And all of this can be provided on the hypervisor. It's distributed in nature with that 100% visibility. Now, all very well and good me saying how amazing our VMware solution and how unique we are, how we're distributed in nature, and we have designed a security solution that is designed to sit on the hypervisor. But, the proof's in the pudding. We're underpinned by our network detection and response solution. Now, SE Labs, which is an independent body, tested our network detection and response solution against a range of hacking attacks that are designed to compromise systems and penetrate large target networks in the exact same way as criminals and other attackers breach systems and networks. Now, full chains of attack were used in this testing, meaning that the testers behaved as real attackers. They probe targets using a variety of tools and technical and vectors before attempting to gain that lower level, more powerful access. Finally, the testers and attackers, attempted to complete their missions, which might include stealing information or damaging systems. I'm sure everyone's seen quite a few of these wiper attacks where not only is an attacker getting hold of critical data and information, they may charge a ransomware, but they're wiping and deleting the data after, as an example, and also connecting to other systems of the network. Now, as I've mentioned, often these network detection response solution or behavioural based solutions can be very sensitive and actually very, very tricky to test. So, for example, they end up detecting every single thing, giving them a huge detection score, so detected so much, rather than detecting security relevant alerts. Now, part of an exploit, malware, or something that's suspicious login, these aren't threats as we've discussed, but correlating all these individual points together can detect a full attack chain. Now, our solution was detected against the ability to detect the delivery of targeted attacks, to track different elements of the attack chain, including compromises beyond the endpoint and into the wider network. They also tested how we handled legitimate applications and other objects. And also, legitimate traffic was used alongside the threats to measure any false positives or other, suboptimal interactions. As you can see here, we scored 100% detection accuracy, and legitimate accuracy was 0 false positives. So nothing went undetected and there were no false positives. But the crucial here is to look at there were no false positives. As we've mentioned, these solutions can be very, very sensitive. The key here, when we did alert, it was always a security relevant alert. That was a reason and an intelligent reason to alert an organization of something malicious. That ultimately also allows us to reduce the time to detect, reduce the dwell time, reduce the time the hackers are in looking at critical information, getting access to other systems. So all these attacks our product was tested against have been witnessed in real world attacks over the past few years. And I appreciate with COVID and the lockdowns, this has been quite an eventful past few years, especially across the threat landscape. So they are, a representation of real and present threats to businesses in the world. So as we know, an attack is made up of multiple stages across the attack, the attack chain. SE Labs have recorded when a product detects something malicious, including the initial delivery stage of an attack, when a connection is first made, and when malicious code is sent to the target. That's how they determine that detection. Now, they also look for code execution as well, and this is behaviour by the attacker after their attempt to gain that lower level access. So privileged escalation, going in at a low level and being escalated. Their movement across the network after the first stages of the attack through lateral movement. Now, we were awarded the first and the only ever AAA rating by SE Labs for any product. Our solution showed such strong results and not one attack stage went undetected. Sometimes, as we've discussed, the products can be super aggressive and detect everything, including threats and legitimate objects, etc. But this is where we stood out. This is where we're different from other solutions. So let's have a look at what the takeaways are here. What's the value to you? First of all, the cost savings. As we've discussed, you can reduce CapEx 75%, OpEx 73%. And a lot of that comes from that consolidation of tool sets. You don't need a separate data center firewall hairpin traffic. You don't need a separate signature-based detection looking for known threats. And you don't need a behavioural-based detection solution looking for unknown threats. That can be consolidated into one solution. Not only that, there is no compromise here on technology. There is no compromise on visibility. We have 100% visibility. We have no network changes, so we enable you to easily segment the network. Most crucially at the moment, I know there's some 6-month backlogs at the moment for hardware This is all done in software. We enable this, this solution with no blind spots, 100% visibility, and if you like, advanced threat prevention at every single hop. And lastly, it's simple to manage. We reduce stale policies. We provide automation around rule recommendation, policy automation, reducing the alerts for you guys to be able to manage and have full visibility across the modern data center. Now, thank you very much, everybody, for your time this morning, and giving me the honour to be able to present how to secure your modern data center with our solutions. I just want to open it up to see if anybody has any questions here.
No, I don't see any questions in the chat. Maybe then I'll ask one.
Yes, of course.
Does VMware see differences in data protection designed to Northern Europe comparing to Western or Americas? What advice would you give to Lithuanian companies?
And is that, I think within Europe, we have, in my opinion, a lot stricter data protection, and it's very much removing this security as a compromise. I know I mentioned it a couple of times throughout the presentation. A lot of times organizations are seeing security as a compromise, or security is very black and white, allow, block, or we're not going to allow this, or whatever it might be. The compliances that we have and the security mandates across Europe are very, very strict. And I think they're very much pushing the behavior of our organizations to say, it's not as simple as, deny or allow. It's not as simple as yes or no. We need to be aware of what's happening with the data. We need to be aware if there is an attack, we need to report the attack. We need to be able to track, and we need to understand exactly where, a threat actor has been across the network. What data could it have taken or could it have touched that we don't know? Mm-hmm. The threat landscape, again, as I discussed, is becoming so mature and it's evolving so quickly. The type of attacks we have, for example, supply chain attacks, it's very much a Trojan horse. So we've got an attacker over here, and it's just a distraction to what's happening within people's networks, within the data center, with people exfiltrating information. And it's being able to have this full visibility to understand exactly what is happening within the data center. I think that's how things such as GDPR, that's the behavior they're pushing, and that's almost, it's becoming the expectation and the norm for our customers.
And are some integrations of other equipment from other hardware vendors possible, or your protection works only on VMware virtualization and you protect your perimeter?
Great question. So our solution works on any hypervisor. It doesn't have to be VMware. We also have something called a notification pipeline, and that allows us to be able to share this intelligence that we've said. We're able to share this intelligence with other solutions, such as a SOAR or a SIEM, and we're able to share that to allow remediation from other tools as well.
Okay. So is quite silence from the audience. I see that someone is typing. Maybe we will have the question.
Excellent. It is. It's still, I was about to say, still quite early, but maybe everyone's waking up. Or the presentation was that good? We have no questions. Who is it?
You got an inconvenient question about competitors.
Very, very good question. So it's a hard question to answer, and the reason is very often NSX is explored or purchased for a security use case. So very often an organization has said, we need segmentation for whatever reason, whether it's compliance driven or they need to segment their network. The solution I presented today is just the security part. So we're saying we can just secure and segment your network without virtualizing the rest of the network. It's just the security. By doing that, we can also provide enhanced and advanced security to leverage that investment. So when we discuss competitors for NSX, traditionally it's segmentation or micro-segmentation competitors such as Illumio or Guardicore, which are great solutions, and they have great they have great you can link them to other security solutions. So you can have, Illumio or Guardicore, you can have an API call probably to another security solution. The uniqueness for us is no one else has this solution. We've designed it for the hypervisor. So it's quite a hard question. So if it's segmentation, it'd be Illumio and Guardicore, great solutions, not quite as comprehensive as us. If you're steering more towards this advanced security, so leveraging, so that's step 2 and step 3, so looking at known and unknown bad, we very often see competitors such as Palo Alto, Fortinet, and also network detection response competitors such as Darktrace, ExtraHop. Obviously, we have a lot of uniqueness as well, as I'm sure everyone would say. But yeah, twofold: segmentation, Illumio and Guardicore; advanced security, Darktrace, Vectra, Palo Alto, Fortinet, Checkpoint. Actually, very often with their cloud-based network detection response solution around signature-based, which is a little bit of a different way to implement.
Okay, so the main competitors are the same hardware vendors.
Exactly that. Yeah.
What is a bit different from your perspective as you focus only on hypervision solutions?
Yeah. No, exactly. I think very often where you have a customer who's looking at segmentation, they're either not segmenting at the moment, so we don't really have a direct competitor because they don't have a solution, or they're using these huge data center firewalls to try and hairpin that traffic. So that's why with its segmentation, we very often come up against those hardware vendors.
Okay.